Welcome to Inspired Nonprofit Leadership, where you'll hear insights and useful strategies, as well as lessons learned from other nonprofit leaders and valuable tips from a variety of experts. Here to help you with the challenges and opportunities you face day after day is your host and nonprofit leadership expert, Sarah Olivieri.
Hello, nonprofit leaders. I'm Sarah Olivieri, your host, and this podcast is here to assist people like you, executive directors, board members, and other nonprofit leaders unleash your full potential. Having been an executive director, a board member, and now a consultant and coach myself, I truly understand the challenges you face. And that's why I'm here to bring you experts that have valuable information, inspiration, encouragement, and lots of tips to share with you. And in addition to these guest episodes, you can get weekly tips delivered right to your email inbox by going to inspirednonprofitleadership.com/sign up. All right, let's dive in. My guest for today is Holly Rustick, who is a world-renowned grant writing and business coach. We've talked before on her podcast. I think she's been on this podcast in the past before I was the host. She has the Freelance Grant Writer Academy and Grant Professional Mentorship. And in 18 months alone, Holly's program students in her two programs have collectively secured, are you ready for this? $137+ million in grant funding and $2.7 million in their businesses. She's been a grant writer and trainer for 20 years, probably over 20 years at this point, and has a mission to coach grant writers to help causes they care about while making an equitable income on flexible hours. Welcome, Holly. It's such a pleasure to have you. Before we dive into tips and inspiration and such, I'd love you to share just a little bit about yourself personally so our audience can get to know you on a personal level too.
Sure. And thank you so much for having me on the podcast. It's so fun because I've been on your YouTube channel, right? And then I've been on Mary's before, right, on this one. So it's fun to come together full circle. So, and you've been on mine, grant writing and funding. So we're all good. But yeah, a little bit about me. I live on the island of Guam. So a lot of people might not know that. They might be, but we are over about a 3.5, 4-hour flight from the Philippines and in the Pacific Ocean. And I've been here since 2011. My daughter was born here. And I've been grant writing, like you said, over 20 years. Started after the Asian tsunami. I went to Indonesia and got right on the ground and started writing grants without even knowing what that was. Basically just thinking, how can I help the community get money from these big UN organizations? And writing grants and asking for money was one of those ways. So yeah, and I've been doing that ever since. And kind of a more recent, if you don't know me, I'll let you in this group. Ever since, okay, so we are recording this, y'all, in early Feb, almost mid-Feb now of 2025. So if you know, you know, grant world has been quite explosive in the last few weeks. And so I'm training for a marathon. That's how I'm pivoting my energy right now. And I'm kind of okay, let's get through this process. So yeah, so that's me. Yeah, I live on Guam. I'm a grant writer. I train hundreds of people and writing grants, setting up businesses, primarily women and moms, and working with people who are also burned out executive directors looking to transition or retire into consulting. So that's me. Thanks, Sarah.
There's the whole picture in a nutshell. Well, considering today's timing, I'd love, we're going to talk about how there's this culture in the nonprofit space, in the helper space, to kind of I used to say open up your arms and bleed for your nonprofit. And there's definitely this culture of guilt that we were going to talk about, working in a nonprofit or just accepting low pay, and happens in the helpers of the helpers professions, folks like us. I see too many people just really, sacrificing a living wage because that's what you do. I'm doing air quotes for those listening only. So I want to dive into that, but I also want to make sure we touch on in this moment a skill I know you are familiar with, which is how to pivot. Yeah. And I think those two things tie in together, whether you're pivoting as a professional or as a leader in your own nonprofit or in your own business. So I'm going to leave that really open-ended and see where you want to begin with those topics. What comes to mind?
Okay, yeah, we get here for a while. Yeah, a certain amount of time. So in general, I think pivoting is just normal in a way, right? Like there's constant change going on always. And I think when we think to pivot, that's usually when it's more intense and quick change than we're used to. So it causes us maybe to move at a faster pace in a different direction, right? And I think part of that can be very healthy in a way of like, okay, we have to respond. And it doesn't always have to be super reactive. It can also be proactive, right? And how you pivot. So it doesn't just have to be like something happened and then you gotta, and it's stressful. Like you can also prepare and plan to pivot as well. And
That's my favorite.
yeah, exactly. I'm just, talking about your brand right now. So yes. Brand. So yeah, so there's definitely, there's two sides to this, I think. And if we look at it in a lot of like the bigger context, especially as grant writers, especially as nonprofit executive leaders, we've been pivoting a lot in the reaction, I think, lately, right? Especially since COVID.
Mhm.
And I know even with everything going on right now in the grant world, and just a few weeks ago, all the grants were frozen for a minute, and then all the things, right? Like in the grant world, in the nonprofit world too, we just had an executive order the other day, right? So it's also looking, and I'm not trying to be political, but I am because I'm a grant writer, so I have to pay attention to what's going on. And so do nonprofits, especially if they're getting federal grants. So what we're looking at too is to say, hey, like you heard in my intro, I've been doing this for over 20 years. I've been through administrations, been through COVID, been through inflation, been through a lot of pivots, right? A lot of pivots. And I think sometimes that we just realize that, okay, we've done this before, sometimes as a reactionary and sometimes as a proaction. I've also quit my job, right? I've also pivoted out of that. And that was something I led with, right? So I think just calming the nervous system when you think about pivoting as well is really, really important no matter what the choice is. Even if it's a positive, proactive choice, it can bring on a lot of stress, right? It can bring on a lot of like unknowns, right? So I think that's really important. So kind of just talking about it from the big context of, yeah, your nonprofit, let's go wide for a second. Your nonprofit right now in the world, if you've been receiving federal grants for a long time and you have a certain cause area, you may need to pivot hard right now, right? And we've actually been preparing for this since the election because we saw signs coming down the road for certain priority areas as in any administration when they changed their funding priorities. So if you're in certain priority areas that may not be prioritized during this administration, you may need to pivot hard. And what that might look like, especially if you've been receiving federal grant, is leaning into foundation grant, is leaning into corporate grant, is leaning into fundraising and donations, into really strategy, and also just going back to, were these grants really essential? And yes, and a lot of them are. Like, I'm not going to play around here. A lot of them are. How can we get extensions? How can we double down and ask our partners, hey, we need more access to capital right now because of everything that's going on? Having real conversations about the reality of it.
Yeah.
And if you've got programs too that you're like, you know what, that was kind of mission drifting a little bit, can we pull back here a little bit as well? And having those just real, honest, transparent conversations with your stakeholders or with your board is essential right now. So that's really like the broad level I'd like to bring in as far as like the hour we're living in, Sarah. But if you want to micro level it down, I'll just go here for a minute and then I can open it up again for you to ask me a question. But if we want to narrow it down a little bit more, like there's also the pivot, as you mentioned, like I've been an executive director for 30 years or whatever, 20 years, 10 years, whatever that is. I am ready to retire. I'm getting ready to hand over the reins to someone else, or I'm just burned out and I need to do something different. There's also an ability to prepare for pivot, right? If that is where you're going as well. So it could be a personal pivot. It could be a grander pivot, part of your nonprofit. And I think just knowing, like, easing your nervous system, creating some plans, either a strategic plan for your own self or for your nonprofit that you're working with, or working for, then you can definitely look and say, it's okay. We can be innovative, but let's do some self-care, let's level our nervous system, and then let's focus on solutions.
Yeah, really, really good tips. And what I hear in there that is so important is you may be forced to take action. You might have to be reactive to change, to leave your current state. but you almost never do not have the option to choose where you go instead.
Yeah.
Right? And if you can calm yourself, you can not only realize that there are multiple places to go, but opportunities emerge. I mean, I heard you say you can now trim down those mission creep programs. You have a reason to ask for that. You just got gifted the oomph of a capital campaign without having to buy a building, right? We lost our federal funding. Hello, donors. It is time to step up big time. You all know why. Now, it shouldn't be a surprise. A big wave of change has created opportunities for you now to do things that you couldn't in other moments. Just like COVID created a wave of opportunities to go virtual, to go national, to go international, right? That other people would have said like, oh, maybe we should really do that. Maybe now is not the right time, or like, oh, what's that Zoom thing anyway, right? COVID eliminated all those challenges and created a lot of opportunities. So that's really key. So let's talk about, kind of pivot to our other topic. And let's talk about those folks who are, what is it that keeps nonprofit leaders in this toxic space? What is that space? And then what does it look like to get out of that?
And yeah, I think like, okay, here's the thing for me. And if you guys follow me, you might go check us out. What we talk about a lot is quit your toxic nonprofit job. And you're like, but Holly, you work with nonprofits. I'm like, yeah, I'm not saying people at nonprofit are specifically toxic at all. Talking about the system, right? And I know you and I, Sarah, we've talked about the system a lot. Some nonprofits are wonderful, awesome places to work. But overall, like the sea of the nonprofit world that has been formed is a bit toxic because of the mindset, because of how it was incorporated, without the ability to really lobby, without, just looking at just instead of prevention programs as much, looking at individual services. There's a lot that laid the groundwork for decades, and it being more of like this charitable lens. And I think part of what you can look at just to kind of level that playing field of like reducing the toxicity, it starts in mindset. And I don't mean to be woo-woo, but I'm going to lay some facts, right? Let's say right from fact. For woo-woo, okay, go for it. Woo-woo-ness. Okay, so what we can look at is absolutely the nonprofit sector is an integral part of the economy, and so are grants. And we saw nothing less than what's happened in the last few weeks. Go ahead and justify that, and and to really say yes, grants and nonprofit work is embedded in every single community. Once I go political for a minute, doesn't matter if you're blue or red, it is in every single community. Different politicians of all different parties have supported the work that different nonprofits do, different agencies do that get grants, etc. So if you look at this, really, it's not just this charitable like, oh, we're just going to give a few dollars and that's how nonprofits exist. We need to change the mindset and say it is an important part of the economy. I believe it's about 5.3% is the most recent stat as far as that contributes to the gross domestic product of the United States alone. It is the fastest growing sector. Nonprofits rent buildings, they buy buildings, they pay people, they outsource vendors. They are a part of the economy. And you're seeing this play out in real time, where if you're saying, okay, all of a sudden a university is not going to get the grants it needs, that may disrupt the entire economy of a state, because it could be the highest paying, employer in that state that employs and provides programs and brings in money and resources. So let's be real. Part of reducing the toxicity is just to say nonprofits are a business. They are a part of our economy. They are integral to that, right? So why are you treating people in nonprofits, right? And why are you treating yourself? All right, we're going to do some self-discovery here. So executive directors and board directors, you may be bringing that own thought of it's charity. We just got to donate. We got to volunteer. We got to keep everything cheap. We got to do this because, oh my gosh, we're begging for money. And I know I'm going a little sideways here, but that's embedded in a lot of your psyches when you're working in nonprofit. Mm-hmm. When the reality is you are a huge economic contributor to your economy. And I think having that look, okay. And starting there can reduce a lot of the toxicity when we just look at the facts, right? When we look at the facts. And So when you start off on that, then if you don't have that thought of we're an economic contributor, we're a business, yes, we ask for money. Yes, we request assistance, but that's because the federal government, our state government, and private agencies do not provide these services, and they are needed. So we are stepping in the gap to provide a very much needed service, and we need assistance just like any other business. So we're reaching out maybe in a different way, but still, right? Still, we're running this to meet a need. So I think when you step into it with those kind of thoughts, then instead of okay, we're just here to help and volunteer and and ask everyone for, a discount and just pay peanuts because that's all we can get because we're begging for money, we have to get away from that's what leads to the guilt. So if you had that thought, how it shows up then is putting out job descriptions that have things like all duties as necessary, not publishing the salary on it, right? And then people coming in and they're like, and they have that thought process too of, okay, I'm here to be meaningful and volunteer, whatever, but I want to get paid, so I need to pay my bills. And even coming in with a lot of skills, but then saying, okay, it's for this cause, I need to maybe donate some of my time or not charge all of my hours or work on weekends and all of that. And they're mimicking a lot of times, I'm calling you up, the executive director.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So that's how it shows up, right? So all of a sudden you have people who are completely burned out. They have no boundaries because they have this job description that's so open. So they really can't be told to do anything, especially if they're on salary. And that's how I was. I mean, y'all, I've been serving on board of directors, right? I worked in nonprofits. I understand both sides. I'm not just coming out here as a consultant. Like, I get it. I've been on every side of this coin for decades. And
as a program director, would secretly fix the toilet every day. I'd stay late and I would fix the toilet. And the reason why I stayed late to fix the toilet is I didn't want anybody to know that I knew how to fix the toilet because I knew it would then be my job.
Oh my
God. It is worth it to wait till everybody leaves the building. And I'll just secretly fix the toilet because no one else.
Right. Instead of hiring a professional to come in and fix the toilet and being like, that's just a part of our operational budget.
That's right. That's right. And that was me at a very young age. I was in my 20s, but lesson learned was, while you may know how to fix the toilet, you should hire someone to fix the toilet or replace the toilet so that it works properly and doesn't have to be fixed every couple of weeks.
I get it. You all are working with a budget. So does any business. In my own business too, I need to make decisions that make sense for my business, right? So, and I do say, here is what I'm hiring for. Here's the job task. Here's what it's going to pay. So if you come in with a PhD, I'm sorry, I'm not going to pay you more because this is what my business can afford. I understand that as well. Right. So I'm not just saying you should pay everyone super high based on, no, you do have to look at your budget and you do have to pay for what you can pay. But then don't overestimate or over ask all of these other requirements that really would not fit into a scope of work if it was an equitable situation. Right. And
totally.
I think that's what can help. I just think that just starting there, just doing what I just said, I'm starting to think different and to start, publish your job descriptions more accurately with a certain scope of work, publish the pay there, and then stop also being guilted to work at your own nonprofit as the leaders can change a lot. Yeah.
So I want to help people make this transition by giving them a view of what's potentially on the other side for them. You've worked with a lot of folks, I think at this point, you've helped them realize what is possible while making an impact. I'm going to guess even a bigger impact, because what I know, as soon as you start having that abundance perspective, everybody wins. But what is that vision on the other side you can paint for folks so that they know it's possible?
Yeah. And I mean, I think just from starting from what I said, that can just start running your nonprofit more clearly. And if you're working at a nonprofit, one of the first things I say, especially if you're thinking, even if you're not thinking of transitioning out and you just want a better work environment, we literally have a quit your job transition plan. And the first step is just to track your time and to document everything you're doing. And then we say, review the job description. See what else you're doing on there that's never on there, or that's on there that you don't have time to do, that they actually hired you to do. And then we just tell folks, hey, give every single task a 1 to 3. 1 is like, it is not moving the needle forward. It's not really creating an ROI for the nonprofit. 2 is like, kind of, right? And then 3 is like, hell yeah, like this is creating the ROI and this is all the work I should be doing. And by just getting data and being able to, even as an executive director, this is important for you to do. You need, because you're probably also like, you're in that same mindset, fixing the toilet and doing all the things, right? We need to like pull back and say, get some data, get some clear data. And then even having that is then when you can talk to the board or talk to you, like as an executive director, you talk to the board. As a staff member, you would talk to the ED, right? And to say, hey, I want to be more in the 3s if I'm going to be here because it doesn't make sense. Like you hired me to do something and now I can't even reach the ROI. You have the expectations that I'm going to reach the ROI, but I can't because of this. And then you actually have data, right? So I think just there alone, and then coming up with some solutions. And part of what we say is eliminate it. Does it even need to get done, those ones, right? Automating. Are there ways that you can automate those 1s or 2s, right? And another way you could say delegate it. Is there somebody else that could do it that's not you? And of course, the other thing could just be put it off on the back burner. Does it need to be done now, right? And that's what's going to help people even through all this pivot right now is you need to have space. And you need to have women power, manpower time, right? Like we need to have our time to be able to actually take a breath and focus. So that's going to help. And right just by doing that and coming up with some solutions and having the data in front of you is going to have a better workplace environment. It's going to also give, especially as an ED going to the board, they're going to need that kind of data to make decisions, right? So, and it'd be like, hey, board, you can take over doing these things because I've been doing them and I need to focus on these other things, right? That you actually hired me to do. So I think instead of just like having that conversation, but having the actual data in front of you. And then, of course, if you're ready to retire, if you're ready to transition out, if you want to become a consultant, a lot of EDs, especially even board members and even staff, love to transition out of nonprofits because they still do love to serve nonprofits, right? But they want to serve more nonprofits potentially, and they want to have more just time and boundaries. And that can be a place where you can create time and boundaries. I know we have a lot of people in the academy who have, they're retiring out. They're about to retire out. And they want to keep some money in on the side. They wrote some grants as an ED. They thought that was pretty cool. And they like doing it. And they're like, you know what? I could still make almost as much as I made full time or even more sometimes and work part time, have my schedule, be able to take off of my summer with my grandkids or whatnot. And have a more equitable kind of lifestyle is what I really look at it, right? And we love to see that but the thing that's been holding them back is maybe not knowing how to run a business in this way, knowing how to price their services because they're still caught up in all the nonprofit charity mindset, right? So a lot of that is coming to terms with like your mindset, how you approach it, how you price, and how you have boundaries. And that can be through simple contracts with scope of work. And that can really neutralize a lot and just set you free. And even like, it doesn't have to be like people that are at the retirement age. We have a lot of people even wanting to move laterally out because they want to, they're moms with young kids or they're moving or they just wanted to work from home and now they have to go back in the office and that's just working for them. Different things like that. So definitely it can be an area where you can still be active and serve the causes that you love, but maybe that nonprofit's still going down that old charity, and you're like, I'm not going to work on the weekends anymore. I am not going to just work for the cause and feel guilty that if I don't do it, like that I'm not like putting my worth in for the cause. Yes, you are. Yes, you are. And it's actually better if you get the rest that you need so you can show up 100% than writing a grant at 3 a.m. the day before it's due. Like now we got to pull some boundaries and policies in place so you can show up 100% for the work for those nonprofits. Yeah.
That's right. And I think that's at the crux of the problem is we have this guilt. We have this feeling like we have to do it because it's charity. We have to just keep piling it on. But the reality of making an impact, of getting that ROI, is that the more we pile on, the less we actually accomplish. And so it builds this kind of downward spiral. Whereas if we build something healthy, if we get that rest, we can show up 100%, we can actually accomplish the high ROI activities and get that return, right? ROI is return on investment. And if you invest, but you don't invest well, you don't get the return.
Exactly.
It's all about how to get the return, not how can we invest as much as possible.
So
right?
much. Yeah. And that's what we're seeing. Like as soon as people are starting their own businesses in the academy, like you read it, over $139 million in less than 18 months. Like it has been amazing to see the results when you can just focus on doing certain work within a certain scope and you're getting the rest that you need and you're not spinning and doing a million other things. It's amazing to see the results and the high ROI that can be done. That. And then even I love it because when you're a grant writer inside a nonprofit, you also have a certain kind of hierarchy that's there, right? And when you become a freelancer or a consultant, you have a different relationship, and even it takes off, like it relaxes the ED's brain, because if you're in-house, they're kind of managing you, and these are the grants that are coming up, and are you on top of that? And because you're doing all these necessary, you're spinning out as an in-house grant writer and trying just to put everything on your plate, and then you're just kind of being delegated to. Whereas if you're a freelance grant writer, you're coming in and saying, here, ED, here's the strategy, here's what we're going to do. I need this information from you, right? And then the executive director can actually relax and open up that brain space for other things because they're not managing someone. Now someone's actually managing them.
That's right.
So
that is a really good topic for another day, is that mindset when we have an employee versus an outside contractor or expert who's coming in. But we'll save that one for another day because we're getting close to time. But I have one more surprise question, since I'm wondering, since you've been on both sides of being in a nonprofit and now you advise grant writers, can we have some pricing real talk for those executive directors, CEOs out there thinking about hiring a grant writer? What kind of prices should they accept as reasonable? And what's behind a price, right? Because, we've heard the saying, you get what you pay for. So just give us a little grounding in a range of numbers if you can.
Sure. So as far as range of numbers, that'll be a little bit difficult because it depends, once again, what your nonprofit is. Like I would look, it's more about knowing what your annual operating budget is. So for nonprofits, 100,000 and less, like you're going to be looking at different rates because you're going to have different needs, right? You're not going to need a federal grant writer at that point. You're going to need someone to maybe get you grant ready, right? You're going to need somebody to maybe write a master grant application, to start writing LOIs, to do maybe some grant research for foundations and writing those. So in that area, I can kind of throw out some numbers. You could maybe look for somebody, $2,500 a month, right, on a retainer to help you through an entire year, put all those things I just said together. That might fit in your budget range, right? And I'm just throwing kind of like estimates out there. But what you really want to look for is somebody then who's not selling you federal grants. This is more of what you want to look for in the pricing, really. You want to look for somebody who's mature in how they're positioning in the sales call, that they're actually giving you pricing, that they're looking at, that they're asking about your annual operating budget, that they're asking where you are, how many grants you've written, all of that. That's going to give you more maturity, right? And they may start off just to give you a small package, like let's get grant ready at $1,500 or $2,500. Like in those ranges could be really a good fit too, just to get grant ready. Not even writing grants, that might be more of a budget kind of piece as well.
Yeah, I just want to highlight that right there, because I see so many nonprofits making this mistake. Like, we need to hire a grant writer to apply for grants, and they totally skipped over this phase of getting grant ready.
Yeah, for someone who's trying to sell you federal grants, you're just got incorporated, don't even go with that person. Okay. I'm telling you like what to watch out for too, right? Like you want to know that they know that, like, oh, let's hold the phone, because a lot of you started your nonprofit because you said we can get grants, and it's right, and then you want to do that first. No, you need.
And then you get told, right, that no new nonprofit is getting any grants.
Exactly. So you need, and it's going to take time. If you're under 100,000, it's going to take time. You're going to get a lot of no's in the first year or two. You need to expect that, and that grant writer needs to be telling you that. It is a long-term strategy that you are investing in, okay? So now let's look at larger, medium to federal grant, larger nonprofits, over 2 million and so forth, like over, up to 250 to $1 million and then plus, right? In the middle, I call these like expanding nonprofits. They're, they've gotten some grants, but now they're going to dip their toes more into some state grants or federal grants and that sort of thing. So yeah, you're going to be looking at a higher amount, but you might not be doing the grant readiness. You might be diving right into the grant prospecting. You might be diving right into the grant writing. And then, of course, at the higher level, when you have a larger nonprofit, like that over 2 million mark and so forth, then you're focusing more on those federal grants. But you may also be going, we've been getting too many federal grants. We want to pivot more into foundation grants. So it really depends on the type of grant writing for prices. But if you're in the federal mark, you could be saying anywhere between $4,000 to $10,000 a month would be, and $10,000 to $15,000 a grant to write a federal grant. Like that's just for one grant. Like that's where you're hanging out in, right? In those kind of prices. So I know that's very, and like I said, it's going to be varied, but it depends on what type of nonprofit you are, where you're at in your journey with grants for what type. And that, because why am I going to pay more for a federal grant than a foundation grant? It could take 100 to 150 hours to write a federal grant. It could take me 20 to 40 hours to write a foundation grant, right? So there's just time with it as well, but there's also skill level and a lot of other things involved too. So I would say don't just think about the price and try to get the lowest price if you are going out there trying to find a grant writer. Like I've said, see if they have retainers. See if they're offering you things that make sense, like I just said, with where your organization is at. And even just like a package that we'll write 5 grants and it's $5,000. I don't really like that either, because grants are open at certain times throughout the year. And if I'm going to write 5 grants in a month for $5,000, like I'm not maybe going to write the best matched grants for you. I'm just going to find what's open and check it off my list. Like that's what actually happens. And that shows like less maturity as someone who's a freelancer, as a grant writer. You want to find someone who also has retainer packages, that knows there's going to be grants at certain times. You need me around. This is a long game, etc. Is that helpful, Sarah? I know that was a lot.
Oh, that is so helpful. There's so many gems in there, which I think people are going to take away about like how to be thinking about grants, and hopefully some realizations about now, like, what it takes, that people aren't just diving into, like everybody does grants. Well, not everybody does grants. And if you're going to do it, you need to do it well.
Because you're wasting your money. Honestly, otherwise you're wasting your money.
Yeah.
So have conversations, get on sales calls, find out processes of freelance grant writers, see how mature they are in their offering. It is important, because otherwise it's like me. I invested in SEO like a few years ago, and I wasn't ready. I didn't have the time even to write the articles and all of the things. I really burned my money, right?
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. It's so much, I've given this advice before, but we've come around to it. It's often not so much about how much, but about when. When is the right time, right? Because any good service has the potential to have a good ROI, right? That's like the nature of it. Experts are good at getting return on investment, but it's not always the right time for you to take advantage of their expertise. And so you have to like know what's going to be involved for you.
And on that note, that would be the other biggest thing I would say. You need to be available for that grant writer. As I mentioned, they start to manage you. So if they send you an email saying, I need all these documents, you better send them, because they might have policies, especially if they're mature freelancer, that we teach this, is they need a turnaround time. So they may need a 4 to 6 week turnaround time to write a foundation grant, or a 6 to 8 week turnaround time to lead time, right, to write a federal grant. And if they don't get the information, guess what? In time for their policies, they won't write the grant. And that's going to be on you. So you also need to show up in those relationships and get documentation.
Yeah. Love it. Okay. I see my video froze. I don't know what's happening there. That's I have a new computer and this has started. I'm just going to see if I can fix that, and then we'll wrap up.
Maybe you're frozen on my end too. Maybe turn it off and on.
That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to unplug it and replug it.
Oh, you have a cam.
Yeah, which I love, but I got a new computer and this has started happening with the new computer.
I recently went from PC to Mac and I'm still adjusting.
Are you? Okay, there we go. I'm back.
Okay, cool.
Well, it's time to wrap up. And so I want to ask you, what are your final words of advice? And who are those folks who should be reaching out to you? And what is the best way for them to do that, to learn about your programs?
Yeah, I would just say like at this time, and I don't know definitely when this is going to be published, but probably in 2025, take a breath, calm your nervous system, but prepare, right? Prepare your nonprofit, or prepare if you are going to be transitioning out and you do want to become a consultant. Definitely start preparing, like I said, tracking your time, tracking all those things, really analyzing things from a higher level on both ends is going to be important, both for your nonprofit and for yourself. And of course, we have our Freelance Grant Writer Academy, which helps aspiring and seasoned grant writers replace their full-time income on flexible hours, writing grants from home. So we can definitely help you with that. Check us out. You can also listen to our podcast, Grant Writing and Funding, and we're on YouTube as well. So if you want to find us there, since you guys are either watching this or listening to this, definitely tune in there to see more information about how you can transition, as we talk about it quite a bit. But yeah, I mean, just give yourself compassion as well, I think is a big part during this year. Like, be compassionate about your causes and, also advocate as much as you can for your nonprofit, but without burning out. Try to come together in as far as like cause areas or geographic location, and really try to also cross party lines when you're advocating. I think it's so important for us to come together right now and to advocate for the nonprofits, and because they serve everybody. So I think just coming together, having the conversations, advocating together, and taking care of yourself is going to be so, so important. So yeah, thank you, Sarah, so much for having me on. It's been fun.
Yeah. Excellent tips. And thank you so much, Holly. And thank you out there for listening and for everything that you do to make our communities better. Before we fully sign off, I have a small favor to ask you out there listening. Would you please take a moment to rate this podcast wherever you listen to it and share it with a friend or colleague who could benefit from these conversations? Until next time, do take care of yourself, and I wish you all the best.
You've been listening to Inspired Nonprofit Leadership. Thanks so much for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode or the bonus episodes. And while you're at it, please leave a rating and review, and be sure to share with your friends and colleagues. Tune in every week for more useful insights and wisdom on nonprofit leadership. Thanks so much for all you do for the communities you serve. Until next time, all the best.